Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. Folks, it's the Super Bowl on Sunday, and you know what to do. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Like this stream, put on push notifications. Say hello to Bradley Alsop because there is only one game separating us. And who has to drink those disgusting sodas that Kowalski so generously provided? It will be determined this weekend. Hello to Bradley.
Hello. On Sunday, the biggest night in sports.
Oh.
The Super Bowl.
Yes. Taylor Swift will fly apparently from Tokyo. Don't worry, everybody. She's flying from Tokyo to make it.
She's going to land on the field.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be like a military flyover.
She will. Yeah, I mean, and then then she'll sue anybody who criticizes her emissions.
No, don't.
No, just that college kid that was tracking her private jet. The same one that did Elon Musk.
He's the pop culture Snowden.
That's the level of... I don't care. That's the level of emissions we're talking. It's like comparable to frickin' Elon Musk. But apparently this is the feminist hero of our lifetime. Hey, Bradley, how you doing?
Hey. I'm great. I'm excited for the weekend.
I know. I'm not feeling necessarily confident because I had a big lead on you. And the fact that it is now this close, like I went 1-2 last week and you went 3-0. And now I'm only one game ahead. It's just not good. It's not good. We'll see. Maybe I should adjust my attitude so that I, feel a little bit better going into the weekend. But
do you want to be reminded of the flavors of soda that we have over there?
Sure. I see ranch dressing.
Ranch dressing.
That's the one that makes me most grossed out.
Sweet,
even though I
sweet
like
corn.
ranch. What?
Sweet corn. Bacon soda.
Oh, Jesus.
Peanut butter and jelly soda.
Oh.
There's one more, I think.
I mean.
That's a
pretty
few
rough.
of them. That's 4 of them.
That's a lot of disgusting sodas.
I'm really excited.
Yeah. Well,
for either you to drink them or for me to drink them.
If I have to do it again, I mean, the cheese thing last year was rough.
It was
this is
masochistic.
Somehow an improvement. But we'll have some fun. We'll have some fun with it. We'll get to that in a bit. But we have to touch on the NBA trade deadline.
That's
because the Knicks won the trade deadline. Okay? This is a sentence that I never thought I would say. And I know we're biased towards these New York teams. We want to talk about them a little bit more, but you have to indulge us here because the Knicks are competent for the first time in a really long time from a front office perspective. And even when they were good, even those years with Carmelo Anthony and that season when they had some playoff success, it was mostly carried by Carmelo. Like the team was not as complete as what we're seeing right now, where, the one concern I have is that so the Knicks got Bogdanovic and Alec Burks from the Pistons. Bogdanovic has a $19 million contract next year, and it basically swaps out Evan Fournier, who wasn't seeing any time on the floor, wasn't playing off the bench either for the most part. That swaps that contract for Bogdanovic, who is, I know he's in his mid, like he's 34 or something like that, but he still is a really, really effective player, and it's arguably the biggest get of the trade deadline. I know that the Mavs got PJ Washington, but I think the return and the fact that they sent back to the Hornets a 2027 first-round pick that's only top 2 protected, like that I think is going to undercut the fanfare around it. And I just think I would rather have Bogdanovic in a vacuum than PJ Washington. But, he's a great perimeter scorer. He's gonna be really valuable, I think, for the Knicks because like OG Anunoby's elbow injury may be worse than is being publicly portrayed. I've heard rumblings that he's not going to have surgery, but that it's going to last a little bit longer. And then, you have Julius Randle, who's still recovering from a dislocated shoulder. Jalen Brunson rolled his ankle the other night. So the Knicks are really, really banged up. And if in the off chance, and I pray that this is not the case because I love Anunoby's game, that he's not able to basically complete the rest of the year or something, or he needs to have surgery, you have size now and Bogdanovic who can step in there and provide, I think, a lot of offense for the Knicks. Like, this is a really, really great trade for them. And I like Quentin Grimes a lot, but I never really saw him as his offensive game going to the next level. And they are now just like what the Knicks have done is they have gotten rid of a lot of their young players. I understand that, but it's basically to meet the level of the play that they're seeing from Julius Randle and from Jalen Brunson, and saying like, okay, let's go all in on the way that these guys are playing. And like, it's not crazy to think that the Knicks could win the East. I mean, I'm serious about this. The Knicks are really, really complete.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's there's a part of me always that shudders, or I think it's because of my my trauma response to being a Knicks fan, is that I always get nervous about players leaving the team, because either A, I think it might be a mistake for the team for the team and the players themselves, or B, I fear that they're going to be much better on the other when they put on another jersey. So on one hand, like, I obviously didn't really enjoy having Quentin Grimes on our team. I thought he was a nice spark plug off the bench, and a solid to good to even sometimes great dogged perimeter defender. But I still think even in certain lineup constructions here, that their defense will not be compromised significantly. And if, in the best case scenario, for the injuries on this team, if hopefully, Mitchell Robinson can return prior to the playoffs, if OG Anunoby,
he's starting to do some work.
Yeah, if OG, as you said, if it isn't as severe as maybe it might be, or maybe they're sort of, or if in the event that they aren't actually kind of slow rolling a more grave prognosis, and he returns, but also if Julius Randle is able to return, prior,
he will be in the next. Right. I mean, his dislocated shoulder stuff is like, that's fairly straightforward.
Right,
he'll be back soon.
So I just think that with the team getting healthier, I won't be nearly as concerned about the defense, just because I think the rebounding and the rim protection that will come with Mitchell Robinson being back, and kind of the intensity that it will come with Julius Randle also returning as well. That the intensity that with Isaiah Hartenstein and with Jalen Brunson, with even the few guys that have had to step up in lieu of those injured players, I'm not really concerned about any significant defensive drop off. If anything, I think Bogdanovic, despite, he'll be 35, he turns 35 in April. I just looked it up, but having another person who can reliably knock down threes, and having someone who can continue to spread the floor for the Knicks, which is something that they have struggled with consistently throughout the last few years, of just not either A, clogging the paint with a number of guys, or B, only being able to rely on one or two guys to basically create, offense out of nothing, almost, to create it mostly out of like isolating possessions, or kind of straight up one-on-one matchups. I think will be really, really, really important. And especially, as you said, even if the worst case scenario comes to bear with Anunoby, having someone like Bogdanovic to be there, to be able to just kind of trail back, stay on the line, stay behind the line, and knock down threes, despite any sort of potential defensive drop off. Just via age, and I don't think Bogdanovic tries. He's the important thing about him that I will say, regardless of age and defensive prowess, is he has always been a really high effort guy. I feel like, and
that's what Tibbs wants, right?
From his stints in other places too. Even in teams where I feel like he was in bad situations, with the Pistons and other places, he still, I feel like, was very, very intrepid in his efforts. So I am very much looking forward to having more options on offense for this team outside of the one-on-one hunting that has honestly worked for them in almost a more anachronistic way of NBA offense relative to a lot of other teams, but it'll be good for them to have more release valves than they do now.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about that, and just the fact that they only gave up 2 seconds, and the Knicks still have 2 first-round picks this year. And one of the first-round picks they have is for the Mavericks, who are getting dragged for this trade, because the protection, as I mentioned earlier, for that 2027 first-round pick is only top 2 protected. That's pretty massive for the Hornets to get that when they're basically selling, and they're trying to collect as many first-round picks that they can. I mean, they also got another 2027 first when they sent Terry Rozier to the Heat, and that looks like, a great move for them when they're trying to basically tear everything down at that point. It's just odd to give a pick with that little protection in the future for a complimentary player, and it just feels like, we said this last week, the Mavericks are seemingly doing this every every season where they make a deadline deal where it doesn't put them really over the top. It's just meant to maybe make it look like, I mean, it was Kyrie that was blockbuster and crazy at the time, but
then ultimately they slid towards the end, right? Like,
yeah, they slid towards the end
and missed the playoffs. They didn't even get to the play-in.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was on purpose, clearly.
Oh, right. I mean, especially after what we were talking about last year.
And
with
they ended up picking 10th overall because it was top 10 protected for the Knicks, and now it's moved to this year. But now it's not a protected pick, so the Knicks have 2 first-round picks this year that they preserved at the trade deadline. So like they still can get guys to get younger. But about the Mavs here, it's just, you know, they also got a Gafford, they're from the Wizards too. But like it just feels like it's a really rich return for a team that really doesn't have a ton of picks going forward. And I'm not impressed at the way the team is constructed whatsoever. I don't know. I mean, what is Luka Doncic thinking? I wouldn't feel very confident about the future of this team.
I just think it's interesting with the Mavs, and especially with who has changed hands here, in the sense that, you know, what part of the offseason acquisition cycle for the Mavs was also getting Grant Williams from Boston,
right? To
actually trade for him, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a sign and trade.
To trade, and then obviously sign him to a longer term deal than just a kind of a flyer. And I'm a bit surprised
this might have been one of like the assets, if I'm not mistaken, that they traded away from that sign and trade. So like that's what they turned it into, was PJ Washington.
Oh, I see.
From the Grant Williams sign and trade. I could be wrong.
I guess it's just interesting to me, just knowing Williams' bona fides as he was in Boston, as like, you know, a really, really dogged defender, knockdown 3-point shooter. I would think he would have been kind of useful in a Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving orbited offense. And same goes for Seth Curry. I know he's also a little getting up there a bit in age too, but I still felt similarly about him as like being someone in a driving kick circumstance for both Kyrie and Luka to have a reliable 3-point shooter like Seth Curry.
He can't stay in one place.
I know this is probably his like 7th or 8th team at this point in his career. But it's interesting that the return being PJ Washington, only in the sense that Washington is kind of like, it's interesting. He's only 25. He's a kind of a prototypical athletic wing in that 6'7", 230, long arms. But the thing is, and kind of the morass that is like the Charlotte Hornets organization of like young picks that they've procured in so many successive drafts because they haven't performed well. It's sort of kind of one of those teams that the Magic almost used to be. They're climbing out of it a little bit, and also I would say maybe the Thunder were, but the Thunder clearly are out of it. What I call sort of almost like development hell. You know, like he was sort of like a bunch of young guys, had a lot of pedigree, a lot of kind of cachet coming out of school, and then just get completely lost in the shuffle, completely anonymized in a poorly structured team.
Right.
So I feel like it's hard to fully evaluate him. He's shown some flashes, but he's never, I would say, really shown like consistent high level play in a way that's really like been head turning. So I'm curious to see in a different situation if he will be a huge assistance or a huge boost to what the Mavericks are trying to do, or if they would have just benefited from kind of trying to, continue to have those spots be filled by reliable, more veteran presences in Curry and Williams, who you kind of know what you're getting with them.
Yeah.
But I guess what remains to be seen. It just is interesting that those were the two. I just thought the two actual like sides of the deal in terms of personnel was kind of interesting. It wasn't really anything I would have anticipated. Sending Grant Williams and Seth Curry to a non-contender whatsoever in the East.
After they just made that acquisition, like for Grant Williams in that way, for the sign-in trade. It's just as bizarre, as you say. So, I mean, I don't like the Mavericks. I don't like what they did last year with their effort to screw over the Knicks. I know I'm biased in that way.
No, it made it a little personal too after the whole Porzingis thing as well.
Yeah, I hated the right. I mean, the whole Porzingis thing was frustrating. Even though, I mean, let's give credit to Steve Mills and the Knicks at the time. Those first-round picks are paying dividends, and that's why the Knicks are in this situation right now. In part, that's one of the picks that's rolled down this way in the Porzingis trade. So, Yeah, I mean that I don't really feel confident in the way that the Mavericks are conducting business, and it almost feels like the way that the Knicks used to do things. Just trading away at future assets for guys that
Seems
are not
slightly
really,
impulsive. Yeah.
Yeah. DeJounte Murray didn't get traded. That was a shock.
Right. No movement on, I guess, who we were thinking might be one of the biggest,
He was the biggest name on the trade block.
realistically, I would say. Right.
I think probably because the Lakers were interested in, so they drive so much media, and LeBron wanted him.
And presumably,
out. Yeah.
What did you say?
Didn't end up working out, and I think it's the Lakers should probably stop mortgaging their future for a nearly 40-year-old LeBron James. Yeah.
But I am curious, though, to that exact point, as you're saying, should all of these decisions be purely in mind of, like, filling something around LeBron when, at some point, obviously, father time comes for everybody. Yes. LeBron is not going to necessarily be able to play, I would say, for another like 5 years, let alone 3 or whatever the case may be. I mean, he's defied all logic in that regard for a very long time. But I still think evolutionary biology has its limits, even when it comes to LeBron James.
You see it on the court. But I mean, he's incredible in his experience, but the athletic explosiveness is just, of course, not there.
But with all that being said, I'm almost wondering if they might try a similar thing that they did with Anthony Davis. Obviously, Murray's not the same caliber or cachet of player as Davis, but I mean, like, potentially linking towards or moving towards a trade before the deadline, maybe just being like, listen, maybe it'll be easier for us to just try and get him away when the offseason hits again.
I think that's a good way to read it. Doug McDermott went to the Pacers,
right, as well as Buddy Hield and Corey Joseph as well. So Pacers had a little bit of an influx of shooting, and also former Pacers.
Oh yeah,
Doug McDermott, Buddy Hield, and Corey Joseph, all former Pacers.
I mean, like, I don't pretend to know like the rest, the ins and outs of all those guys' game, but Doug McDermott I know for like immediately shooter. So like the Pacers are able to get some offense.
And honestly, I think, and same thing with Buddy, honestly, that getting two reliable knockdown 3-point shooters, and also honestly for what Rick Carlisle, who I would say is honestly slightly in the vein of Thibodeau, Tom Thibodeau, in the sense of like kind of older school coaches, intense coaches, like wanting to rely on veteran presences to augment or to help along the younger players, sometimes obviously to a fault or at those young players' expenses. I think Carlisle's vision is a little bit different in that regard. Yeah. He doesn't go that hard as Thibodeau does in that direction, but I think with like such a young, explosive core, I think honestly just at the margins to get guys who are just knockdown shooters like that will be helpful. And also, if anyone's going to find open looks for those guys, it's going to be Tyrese Halliburton.
Yes,
so I think that'll also be a good kind of filling out for them on a young team.
The assist king before he was put on his minutes restriction.
Right. Just like high wire act, magician like passes.
With
love watching him.
Arms for days or in length. Alex Caruso was reportedly, quote, untouchable in trade talks for the Bulls, which makes zero sense. Like, just another reason that.
Oh, my bad. Excuse me. I made a mistake. Sorry. The Hield was traded from the Pacers to the Sixers.
Oh.
They received Furkan Korkmaz and Marcus Morris.
Okay.
So, not honestly,
I thought they were gonna cut Marcus Morris. Interesting.
Yeah, I guess they got something for him. 3 seconds. So Buddy Hield to the Sixers for Furkan Korkmaz, Marcus Morris, and 3 second rounders.
Yeah.
My analysis still stands though. Korkmaz is basically only a knockdown 3-point shooter. He's kind of and he's a little bit older now that he's been after. I think he was drafted honestly in like 2013-ish. But Marcus Morris is a good offensive infusion off the bench, I would say too.
Caruso, as I said, untouchable in trade talks for the Bulls, makes no sense. The Bulls don't. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like nobody should be untouchable in those trade talks, and here we are.
Here we are. This is what
I put Vucevic, Levine, DeRozan, Caruso, Kobe White. I put everybody on the trade block if I was the Bulls.
They should be tearing it down. I mean, learn a little bit from what the Chicago Bears are doing. Like, they have set themselves up for incredible success, and they'll probably take Caleb Williams. Royce O'Neal to the Suns, 3-and-D. I mean, like, I don't know. He's on an expiring contract, kind of a bit of a mercenary thing for the Suns. Pat Bev is going to the Bucks, kind of funny.
There's always a spot for him on a contender. Interestingly enough, he always finds a way.
He'll make himself visible. Dinwiddie to Toronto, Gordon Hayward to OKC. I mean,
That's interesting.
Charlotte selling.
That's
right.
really the old guy going to a young team.
Totally. But they can absorb the contract because they're so young.
Right. They have so much flexibility. Yeah.
He's also kind of beginning to be like, they have so much flexibility because Jesus, the OKC set up so well. But Hayward's, he's 33 years old.
Yeah.
He's on an expiring contract too. I think he's going to be free agent next year. So like, this is another thing where it's just veteran presence, team that's overperforming
with little
great
stakes.
talent,
Yeah.
very few stakes.
Yeah.
That's kind of all I've got. It was not a huge trade deadline for the NBA.
Yeah, just a few interesting things, but honestly, I think
the Knicks made the biggest move.
Literally, I agree. I think the Knicks and the Pacers probably had the most activity, and I think the Knicks acquisition of Bojan and Alec Burks for Grimes and is, I think, honestly Fournier is the most consequential
and not
acquisition.
Giving up a first
and also not overpaying, because I would have been far more critical of this. I think if it was any sort of first round pick, 2 seconds to me kind of comes out in the wash. It's just not really second round picks. I think especially in the NBA context are just so much more fundamentally different than any late round pick in the NFL, for example. Like the value is just
more as trade pieces. Than
totally
anything.
It's far more of a rarity to find a legitimate high level starter in the second round. It happens, obviously. It's happened before, but it's just much less likely, I feel like. So I'm honestly, in terms of assets, I'm good with that.
Yeah,
with parting with that.
Quickly before we get to the Super Bowl, the National Labor Relations Board earlier this week have said that Dartmouth's men's basketball team can have a union election, can hold a union election.
Woo!
And okay, it's Dartmouth, right? If we're talking about and it's Dartmouth basketball, if we're talking about, what the impact of this is based on the team's relative kind of success and what that would signal for the rest of college sports, that's not the way to look at this. It's huge because the NLRB's Boston director basically said that players are workers and that they have rights under the National Labor Relations Act, and they made that determination that they are employees, that they are workers because they perform work that makes the school has benefits for the school, and they're performing work for the school, and the school benefits from it. Okay, I feel like that's enough, but that the school is the vehicle by which they do their work, meaning the school has control over their work. And this is the point that I think is so key, that players already get a form of compensation. They're already compensated in a way. And Dartmouth makes the case that their form of compensation is scholarships or, I don't know, different other ways that the student athlete experience at an Ivy League school. But then in that point, they're conceding that they're already compensated. So if they're already being compensated in this manner, they should be compensated through wages. This just means so much for college sports going forward, because Northwestern kind of tried this and the case was dismissed. We're in this moment, and it was, I think, in part because of the structure of Northwestern University. Because Dartmouth is a private institution by every metric, it makes it so that they really don't have an argument. They really just don't have an argument here, in my opinion. Now, if, say, Clemson decides to hold a union election, Clemson football, or, I don't know, LSU, do I have faith that the NLRB director that isn't based in Boston is going to come to the same determination? No. But what this does is it sets a precedent for saying players are employees. They have rights under the NLRB. And then this encourages other organizations, other teams, to unionize as well. And this is what's needed in college sports. This is specifically for football, too, with the NCAA looming so large and with this kind of potential super league building where these players are making millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars for their schools, and they're seeing none of it. And these recruits, because they don't have a unified wage system, are going to go to the schools that have the biggest NIL opportunities. So you saw, we mentioned this last week with the Boston College head coach is going to be the defensive coordinator for the Packers. Now, in older times, you would be like, why would you leave to be a coordinator when you're the head coach? You're the king of the castle at this prestigious university and at a college football program that's like whatever, top 50 in the country. But they don't want to do that anymore because he's never going to get like under an NIL system. And I'm happy some players are getting paid at least. But that just means that it's going to completely wash away some of these more mid-level programs. It's done. Unless there's a standardized wage system, then you have an opportunity to save the BCs, to save, some of these smaller schools. But for now, it's going to all be concentrated to these big programs, Michigan, Ohio State, places that are closer to like a lot of rich people and have big rich alumni like USC, like UCLA, like Texas. These are the places that are going to get the highest concentration of recruits. So like if college football decides to be proactive, and that's a huge if, they would, I think, endorse this because then it could continue a system where there are more teams that actually are competitive. If they continue to go down this road without standardized wages, it's not going to be the case. But, again, the NCAA and college football, they'll never heed my advice because they haven't done so to this point.
Yeah, I wish if only they were listening.
Yeah.
If only Mark Emmert watches. Maybe he does.
No, they're just stuffing their pockets of the players' money that they create for them through their labor, through their work, through their sweat and their blood and their broken bones and their torn ligaments. That's what they're doing. They're stuffing their pockets with money until the jig is up.
No, and I agree with you that even if this ruling, as you said, may have been slightly contingent upon the context with which it was being had and like in terms of proximity and in terms of location, in terms of the political climate as well, in terms of probably arguably the most worker friendly and National Labor Relations Board in quite some time, in terms of having Jennifer Abruzzo as general counsel, one of the most kind of visible and worker forward NLRBs. Even obviously, it's bureaucratized, so it's not as if these decisions can be catalyzed into something completely tangible immediately. But just to even have this on the record that there's sort of a decision or an overture made to a college basketball team to recognize them in some way.
Yeah.
It's just truly a matter of having that if any of these situations, any that are now hypotheticals but could become real, in the future, to have this as a precedent is extremely, extremely important.
And what's interesting too is that like the Supreme Court, despite its conservatism, Kavanaugh in particular, who we know he loves baseball cards and
he's a real sports.
He's shown that he's sympathetic to this argument.
Oh, totally. He's actually weirdly in that one case that came before the Supreme Court with the NCAA, he was actually quite scathing towards them in a number of ways about players.
I mean, it's clearly an antitrust like violation to a degree.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Totally. They behave as if like these are these individual programs and the NCAA is just overseeing it. Like they should be treated in the same way that professional leagues
totally
are. And they're colluding to completely immiserate and not pay. Like if you work at the school bookstore, you get wages. Like you get wages. You work at right. Why do players not get wages?
They're amateur cashiers.
And I guarantee
they're amateur vendors.
I guarantee you that the Alabama football team brings in a ton more money to that university than the Alabama school bookstore. Okay, so let's compensate
Books
these players.
Books are expensive though.
You make a good point.
But the only other thing I was going to say too, besides just as you said, it is a strong precedent to be set. But what you're also speaking to in terms of there's two countervailing forces, I think, where it's the schools and the institutions, and by institutions I mean the conferences, obviously become almost amalgamating and morphing together to maximize their profits. And also with some of these conferences, especially with what happened with the Florida State decision, the big takeaway from that not being any sort of like real commentary on how the playoff is kind of arbitrated,
right,
or the kind of skill or kind of like strength of schedule, whatever the rubric might be, but more the fact that Florida State, I think, by all accounts, basically just realized we got to get out of the ACC if we want to have a shot at getting into the playoff with that type of record. Yeah. And so there's that side of things where the conferences kind of just morphing into one another is leading to is both a game or like a school-wide decision, but it's also a decision for all. This is where the cartel aspect comes in, because it's also every school sort of realizing if we put all our heads together into these big blocks, we sort of become too big to fail, and the money will always come in no matter what happens. Like we get to a point now where we are so maximal that it doesn't really matter what happens to the game, what happens to the players if people start leaving, if people start leaving earlier, if people sit out bowl games, whatever the case may be, because they know they're making even a tiny bit of money from NIL or whatever the case may be, they'll be fine because they'll have the actual backing of these, to your point, almost Super League-esque mask conferences. On the other hand, you have the players who, now are totally being characterized as like, oh, it's NIL. They have so much money. They want to go anywhere. They'll be able, look at Shadur Sanders. He's in the Popeyes ad or whatever. He has a watch company that he's starting with his father. Like all that. Like they all have.
Okay before NIL,
right. I mean, it probably helps that his father is who his father is, but there's, I think, a lot of characterization that now, like, oh, NIL has changed it so much that every player sort of has more of a negotiating, bartering position because of that. But you look at how one, it does skew, as you said, to the larger programs, to the more high-profile players, more high-profile sports, but also it's extremely bureaucratized to begin with. You have to make very specific, very notarized claims to justify that why or how you would be making NIL money. It's not just basically going into a store or walking into an admissions office and saying, "Hi, I'd like to collect my NIL check."
Yeah, no,
it's an extremely highly vetted and highly kind of Byzantine process to collect what amounts to really not even close to what you would get, as you're saying, with a guaranteed contract, or even a contract with even a highly claused contract. Right. There's less money. There's more money in that. Yeah. Even in some of these like kooky contracts that are given out, oh, if you get 8 sacks, you'll get $450,000, whatever it is, like that come in certain NFL contracts. You'd still be getting more than saying, "Oh, I have one sponsorship deal with fucking Checkers or like a New Jersey-based fried chicken restaurant."
It's so under the table. It's hard for me to.
But that's the Byzantine aspect too. Is that it's hard? It's actually hard to parse, and so I think because it's hard to parse, it also makes it easier for college administrators and athletic directors and coaches to be like, they're making money.
Yeah, right.
Well, we don't need to standardize anything.
It doesn't have to come out from our pockets.
Right.
It comes from our benefactors.
The market, so to speak.
Yeah. Which is still, they can still make all that money they want from endorsement deals. You know what they still need to make? A standardized wage.
Exactly. And so that's why I find it's interesting is that as the college industry continues to consolidate, the NIL practice seems to be becoming more and more diffuse in terms of how spread out these benefits actually are, but it's still being used as a cudgel to be like, they're fine, they're making money, look at these people.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you for acknowledging that they should be that they're making money.
Right. It's like, look how spoiled they are.
And also give Reggie Bush his Heisman back, you freaks.
I know. Honestly, any of those guys, Terrell Pryor, even OJ. I'm not really OJ. I'm joking.
No, not OJ.
OJ did actually, for the record, in fact, break into his alma mater to try and get his trophies back. Reggie Bush signed an autograph.
No, Reggie Bush got a car. I think that's what it was. He got a car.
Cool.
Oh no! This
I'd take the car too.
Generational freaking athlete that
the best running back ever.
In Southern California, got a car for
the horror.
The horror. Let's do our picks. Here we go.
Last one of the season.
ESVN.
Stone cold lock of the century. All week.
Boom. All right. Well, I saw a little bit before. We're both going with the Chiefs +2. Now.
Sorry, I'm going to you.
I mean, this is what I was surprised because you were toying with going with the 49ers, but I just can't. And it might have been interesting, right? It might have made it more interesting, and you might have been able to pick up ground because the market seems to really like the 49ers, and I agree that the 49ers are more talented than the Chiefs. The Ravens are more talented than the Chiefs, but guess who the Chiefs have? Patrick Mahomes. Last week, I went 1-2. The damn over definitely did not hit in Kansas City, Baltimore. I was right to be freaked out about that. You were right to pick Kansas City +4. I did not get Mahomes over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Frustrating. You easily got Zay Flowers over 43.5 receiving yards and the over for San Francisco, Detroit. That hit too. You were on point. The one that I got was Goff did throw for over 260.5 passing yards. I'm hoping to have a little bit more luck this week with the Super Bowl. I just can't believe that the Chiefs are underdogs here, especially with the way that they've been running the ball with Pacheco, how poorly the Niners have been performing against the run. Despite their size and talent and money on that defensive line, the Packers and the Lions almost beat them. And the Packers have a strong run game. I think the Chiefs are going to ground and pound or attempt to do so, keep the 49ers off the field with Isaiah Pacheco. And if the Niners are ready for it, guess what? Kind of helps to have Patrick Mahomes. And I saw the over rushing total for Mahomes is like 26.5, 28.5 or something. I could see him scrambling like he does in Super Bowls where he just kind of lets it loose. He scrambles way more and rushes way more in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. And he's just in the same way that Eli Manning used to throw all those interceptions and look like crap in the regular season. Then he came into the playoffs and he performed better because he'd take hits. He wouldn't, I respect that less, but like, it's just more, Mahomes is putting his body on the line more in the playoffs. And he hits another level that's not necessarily, I think, reflected all the time in the markets that like people are still getting used to. So, the 49ers haven't been playing particularly well in the playoffs. It feels like we're in a situation with the Eagles last year. The Eagles are more talented. The Eagles are the better team. But Jalen Hurts is not Patrick Mahomes. Brock Purdy is not Patrick Mahomes. And I know that it's so reductive to boil it down to a quarterback, but that is how much I believe in this man. That's how much I believe in this player. I think he's got that Brady freaking psycho mentality and physical talent that is out of control, like Aaron Rodgers plus. He is the greatest player on offense I've ever seen. I still maintain that. And he's in his 4th Super Bowl in 6 years. Yes, 4th Super Bowl in 6 years. So I just don't think that Pat Mahomes misses this opportunity.
I did toy with the idea of taking the Niners -2. Just one, to offer a bit of a contrarian point of view that I didn't really believe but could argue, and 2, to make it a little bit more interesting for our wagering purposes. However, I did this last Super Bowl and I was incorrect. Until they give me a reason to, I'm not betting against the Kansas City Chiefs until they actually lose one of these games. And so far, they have proven to me that even in a season where not 8 weeks ago we thought this team was in hell, we thought this team maybe was going to lose in the second round of the playoffs because of how these wide receivers were playing, how out of sorts everybody felt, how vibrationally everything seemed off. This team that is so unflappable seemed extremely annoyed and pissed off with how everything was going. And yet here they are again. Here we are again, six straight AFC Championship game. As you said, 4 out of 6 Super Bowls. Like, it is hard to argue with those. Sometimes when it comes down to a small sample size, as with any sort of NFL statistic, just by virtue of how many games there are, sometimes statistics can be blunt instruments that aren't useful. Here they are.
Yeah.
The biggest games of since 2018, the people who have been there the most are the Kansas City Chiefs, and the person who has been most impactful in all of those games is Patrick Mahomes. I need to be proven otherwise that he is not going to do that again.
I need to. And you know what? With them being underdogs, you know what's going to be on the freaking bulletin board wherever they are.
We are not getting points.
That is like that is when they are the most dangerous, when they're underestimated because they get salty and motivate themselves. Like, it was the way that the Pats were too, where somehow they convinced themselves that no one believes in them, and it's like,
Tom Brady,
yeah, you're Tom Brady, right?
And Patrick, but now in this case,
and you're Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Everyone believes in you.
And crucially, also, in terms of on the field, this is also a Chiefs team with leagues in bounds since Mahomes entered the league, the best defense they've ever had. So to keep them in a game against obviously an extremely high octane, extremely creative offense in the 49ers, they have a group of players as well as obviously the trump card that they have on the line in Chris Jones, who always is also an enormous factor in big games like this as well on the defensive side. All of the surrounding personnel is so much better than it has been for other Steve Spagnuolo defenses.
Of somebody who's going to go against Kyle Shanahan, Spags is up there.
Right,
with,
you go. It's one off.
He's arguably one of the greatest defensive. He's arguably the greatest defensive coordinator in the history of the sport, based on what he's done in the postseason
for the Giants and for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's literally one Joker against another Joker.
Yeah.
It's like Kyle Shanahan wanting to pull out every sort of misdirect, cloak and dagger, sleight of hand thing, which Spagnuolo obviously loves to do on his side of things as well.
Yeah.
Making Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, two of the best, most creative quarterbacks we have in the league, completely confused and uncomfortable the entire game.
Yeah. And then, I'm going to actually do my, it's number 3 on here, but I think it just plays into what I was saying earlier. I'm going to go with Purdy under 30.5 pass attempts. His median is 27, and I think it's going to be closer to that than over. And I think that in part because both of these defenses have stronger pass defenses than run defenses. So the 49ers run defense hasn't been, as I mentioned earlier, living up to the personnel on the defensive line. They've been easier to run the ball against. Now, I understand that the Chiefs, Joe Thuney is not going to be playing, is what I saw. He's still hopeful, he says, but Andy Reid says that he would bet that he's not playing against the 49ers. And so that is an injury on the offensive line to keep in mind. I still do think that the strategy for the Chiefs is going to be to keep the 49ers in that explosive run game off the field. And that's my point is just I think that both teams are going to try to run the ball based on the fact that a Chiefs run defense is not as strong as their pass defense. And even I know Purdy is much better than Jimmy G, but we've seen that Shanahan, when he gets spooked, he falls into the run game and tries to set the tone there. Plus, the 49ers, when they pass the football, they're much more prone to big, explosive plays, meaning less pass attempts, less dinking and dunking than a traditional team would. So that's why if I would not bet the under for Purdy passing yards, I would bet the under for attempts.
Because they're all yak artists, too.
Yes.
A screen pass to McCaffrey, a pass to Debo, a pass to Ayuk, a pass to Kittle. All of them are really, really good at making hay out of the yards after the catch. And also, another thing, and some people in the YouTube chat have been alluding to this, which I think is a good call, is that when Purdy has been heated up and in drop-back situations, one of the biggest things that he did that kept many snaps alive was scrambling. So even in those capacities, even in a drop back attempt, there's a chance that if Chris Jones or whoever gets home on those plays, he's gonna take off.
I have Purdy over 12.5 rushing yards written down too. I decided instead to go with the pass.
But I think it's a totally good instinct, as you said, because I think against the Lions, when Aiden Hutchinson or whoever was in the backfield, he was taking off immediately.
Yeah, the analysis I had for Mahomes rushing also applies seemingly to Purdy, because that was how they got back in that game against the Lions as well. And again, what is the 49ers' strength? They are one of the greatest, run zone offenses that we've ever seen in the NFL. And the Chiefs don't have the strength of their defense is more of their secondary and their linebacking. I mean, Nick Bolton is one stud.
Willie Gay, Leo Chenal.
Yeah. But they can tee up on their pass rush with Karlaftis too.
Yep.
I just think they're going to try to run. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball. I really do think that.
And as we were discussing last week when we were sort of breaking down Chiefs Ravens, is that we were basically saying, why didn't the Ravens operate under the Blues, St. Louis, no, the Bills blueprint, which is of really running the football, which was giving the Chiefs defense the most trouble because they are sort of vulnerable to the run. And so I totally agree with you. And that's partially, again, to skip to the third pick here. That's partially why I think in the same by that same vein, I picked the over for McCaffrey rushing yards, because I do think, crucially, both teams, if there is any sort of difficulty with the pass rush getting home, they're just going to try and dominate the clock and emphasize the run in order to maintain possession, but also if there are any home run swings, they'll be able to capitalize on them with McCaffrey or either McCaffrey or McCaffrey. Pacheco, maybe he's obviously not the same type of runner in terms of vision, but or just Mahomes taking off, which is very, very likely.
Yeah,
Mahomes has an incredibly low sack rate. There are just so few negative plays you can extract from Patrick Mahomes. So if even when pressure gets home, it is so rare for him to actually go down or even throw the ball away, even throw the ball into contested windows. So if the pass rush for the 49ers gets home, I still think it means that Mahomes is going to be running. It's not even going to lead to many dead balls, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I guess I'm a little surprised you're taking the over. Because I think of the amount of rushing that's going to happen. 47.5 is your other pick.
It's mostly, I think, because of what you were saying with the Yak stuff, is that if those explosives are able, if Shanahan can dial up a few explosives that actually lead to points, I think it might lead to the two sides kind of wanting to amp up the intensity and also sort of go for it the biggest swings. If the game basically, in my view, starts at like 14-7, they're going to be throwing haymakers every drive.
Yeah.
They're not going to be trying to. I think they're going to be obviously going to be trying to hold on to the ball and not turn it over, but they're definitely going to be trying to like really swing for the fences each time, because I mean it's so clear with these teams, if you can't make a mistake, because there's truly a propensity for either one of these teams to score on literally every offensive drive.
Yeah, I hear that. So,
like the crucial thing for the Lions and the Ravens, as we were talking about, is 3 mistakes on each end for them.
And I guess your point too is that also the 49ers have given up a lot of points this playoffs, lot of points to the Packers and to the Lions, obviously. So that I could see it going either way. I just get a little bit nervous about what I think is going to be a rushing attack for both teams, slowing down the game.
This isn't over, obviously, as to your point, if a specific type of game happens. But you're right. If they're sort of trying to grind out the clock to kind of really gut out a sort of lower scoring affair, they're not going to try and do too much crazy stuff through the air for that very reason. Avoid an interception, to avoid a fumble, to avoid a punch out, anything like that, which is literally what sunk both the Ravens and the Lions against these two teams.
Yeah, and this is also okay. So my final pick. We're going out of order again, but I'm going Kittle over 49.5 receiving yards. I think that Spags is going to try to take away Debo more than anything. Right?
Neutralize one of the weapons, right?
Yeah.
Just like make it so that you have to rely on somebody else.
And I think that the Chiefs corners are really, really good in and like
Snead and
Snead and McDuffie
and Trent McDuffie.
Yeah. So I'm also, didn't Ladarius Snead play for the 49ers before? If I'm not mistaken.
No, so
I'm switching.
Charvarius Ward played for the Chiefs, and now he's on the Niners.
Yes,
he's been phenomenal for honestly both teams, but he's really been excellent for the Niners.
Yeah, he's been
so
really,
good.
really good. And so that's just something that I think is like a little bit of an interesting wrinkle there. Charvarius Ward.
Yeah, seriously.
Coming back home to the Kansas City Chiefs, to the team that.
And funnily enough, Chris Conley, who is a long time wide receiver, has been in the league for a long time. He got drafted by the Chiefs and will be playing in the Super Bowl with the Niners.
Yeah, there's a lot of shared starters. The what was it, 12 shared starters or something like that? From the previous matchup.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's something.
Yeah,
like
a lot
that.
of the same DNA going within these two teams.
Right, exactly. So I'm going with Kittle over 49.5 receiving yards. It really was between him and Ayuk because but like it was the fact that I trust the corners to maybe put. I was a little worried about taking Ayuk because of the way that the secondary plays for the Chiefs. I think that Brock Purdy and obviously the Kittle the Kelsey connection with Mahomes is well established, but that's a special thing altogether. That just quarterbacks, when they are confused or feel out of sorts, they go to their tight end.
Totally. And Purdy does, I think, traditionally use Kittle as like a safety blanket.
And I think Kittle will be out there a lot in order to block for run sets and for RPOs and things like that. So I almost
look for this. Look for the in-breakers.
Look at the in-breakers, and I think that he'll have over 49.5 receiving yards. That's my guess. As a safety blanket, tight ends, they typically are
Totally.
that for their quarterback. So I am going with the tight end for the 49ers getting at least 50 receiving yards.
And I think I see where you're coming from with this too, because if it happens, which I think is totally understandable because of how versatile Deebo Samuel is with wherever he can line up, trying to take, and with how explosive he is when he gets the ball, if the Chiefs really just try to sort of like completely neutralize him, Purdy, I think, likes to go to Deebo for those very plays, like for those kind of shot plays, like I'm laying it out and I'm hoping for Deebo to take it all the way.
Yeah.
So if that's really out of the question, Kittle, I feel like sometimes just to get Purdy back into a rhythm, starts getting going.
Yeah.
I feel like we have seen that a few games where Deebo, either when Deebo was out for an injury or sort of neutralizing the game, Kittle has been sort of the one to go to in that regard before kind of trying to get back into the more long range plays with Ayuk or somebody like that.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think Spags is going to think. If we can limit those big over-the-top plays and make sure that we're not fooled by some of like what Shanahan tries to fool us with, we are going to try to limit the big play, and they'll take Kittle for 12, Kittle for 8.
Like death by a thousand cuts almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, they'll leave that open. So yeah.
It's that type of thing though with on both ends here where it's sort of like, what do you take away or try to take away for both defenses, sort of with these high-powered offenses, these incredible skill position players? What do you try to take away, knowing that you'll have to factor for something else? Basically, it's sort of I think I've said this to you before when we've been talking about teams like this, where it's basically like if you know that, for example, Steph Curry is going to get 35 points.
Yeah.
What do you take away entirely so that they have to do something else besides the baseline kind of cuts that you're going to sustain from having superstars on the field? And so I think we're gonna see some of that for both sides. Like, how do we neutralize something so they obviously still, of course, these are two of the best teams in the league. They can always beat you, but it's like, how can we make it a little bit harder for them to beat you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I like the tight ends in this game to go over their yardage totals. I like the wide receivers to go under their yardage totals. And I think that they're going to try to run the football, both teams. So that is my assessment. That's what I feel like how the game is going to go. But there's so many angles to this that it's really impossible to predict. This is just my best attempt.
No, I like your picks. I'm a little nervous about mine.
I'm nervous about mine. Well, we do share one. Kansas City.
I really agonized over it. It is truly my way to not want us to have the same one just for the theatricality of it all. But I really like.
You couldn't do it.
I can't. Like,
can't bet
I've made this mistake before.
And look, I mean, if the 49ers win, I'm telling you, they're the more talented team.
Oh,
so
totally, they
that's
are.
part of it. But I just feel in my gut that the Chiefs are.
It's just hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes. It's always what it is.
And hey, look, the Chiefs could still lose and cover if they lose by 1.
That's right. That's right.
I am we're both going with Kansas City +2. I'm going with Kittle over 49.5 receiving yards, Purdy under 30.5 pass attempts. Bradley's going with the over 47.5 and McCaffrey over 90.5 rushing yards. So one game separates us. I am 29-33-1. Bradley's 28-31-4. Those pushes really killed you because you have fewer losses than I do.
I think it's so funny that if we just do this somehow, just statistically, it seems so unlikely that we would just be within, after 17 weeks, within one game of each other.
And we're both sub 500, even though we try so hard.
we do this every week, and somehow, some way, we are literally with 6 total bets left hanging in the balance. We are within 1 win of each other.
Yes. So.
It's not easy doing this every week,
Hold
folks.
on
Thank
to
God
your
I
butts, folks.
Thank God I don't spend money on these every week.
Oh gosh, yeah. I didn't even bet on the conference championship games. I was like, I'm gonna enjoy this.
I'm out.
Folks, we'll find out after the Super Bowl who's drinking that disgusting soda. Thank you so much for it. For this. This has been a very fun year.
Great season.
Great season.
A lot of twists and turns.
I know, and then it just ended up being the two teams we knew would be most likely in the Super Bowl. I think I had 49ers Bengals.
Which is like totally, I think pre-Burrow entry was like totally reasonable.
Yeah. I just thought, I think I had the Bengals beating the Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
I said Chiefs Eagles again, which was,
Well, no one could have seen the Eagles collapse coming like that. I think I had the 49ers beating the Eagles in the conference championship.
Yeah.
So
totally makes sense.
Folks, NYC driver says, love that Kittle over. Hell yeah, NYC driver.
Come on. What about you? What do you love about my picks?
Blunder Dogs. I hope when the Kansas City Queefs lose this weekend, both of you really do lose faith in them in the future. Their defense carried them to a Super Bowl this year, but it won't be enough to win it.
No, it is. That's just what I'm saying is I need to see it.
Yeah.
I need to see it.
Yeah.
I just need to see it.
400 Blowing Me says, love the show. It helps me talk football with my dad, though his love of Derek Carr is unfortunate. That is unfortunate. You know I hate Derek Carr. Kowalski, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Welcome to the Red Kingdom. Howdy, ESVN. Prior to the Chiefs and Bills game, I put $50 on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. $425 payout. I'm so happy. All my friends, I was throwing my money away. The Ravens are too good. Patrick Mahomes has lost it. I hate Taylor Swift, like she's pointing the camera at her. And, well, I mean, Kowalski, I will say, she's making herself quite visible as she announces her new album. I mean, the woman is pathological in her need for more money and attention. No offense to Bradley, who I know loves her. This is a cold war between us. And the referees are biased for the Chiefs. I've never been so excited about a Super Bowl game before. I mean, when you have money on it, it does make it fun, I gotta say. And that was a good pick by you. All right, finally, score. I'm going 24-21 Chiefs. That keeps me on the under.
What did you say?
24-21.
Yeah, I'm going to say 20. I'm going to say 30-27 Niners.
No, Niners?
Oh, sorry, 30-27 Chiefs. What did I say? 30-27 Chiefs.
30-27?
Yeah, to hit the over.
30-27 Chiefs. All right, that's Bradley. I have it written down, folks. Appreciate you all. We'll see you on Monday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.